I'm just going to do a couple of examples of factoring quadratic trinomials using the AC method. This is our first example, 4x squared minus 7x minus 15. And if you remember, the AC method says basically you're going to multiply the coefficient of the x squared, which is your A term, times your C term. And if we do that, we're going to have 4 times negative 15. And that's going to equal negative 60. So what that tells us is we can factor this basically by saying x squared minus 7x minus 60. So now really what we're looking to do is we want to find two numbers that multiply to make negative 60. And if we add them, we're going to get negative 7. So we have to think of two numbers that'll do that. And again, some people like actually make a little table here and say, okay, so I'm going to get my negative 60, and I could do negative 6 times 10, or I could do 6 times negative 10. And if you do that, you're going to eventually get to the point where you have negative 12 and 5. And you can see negative 12 times 5 is negative 60, and negative 12 plus 5 is negative 7. So what that tells us is we're going to rewrite this now, going back to our original quadratic, as 4x squared. And then we're going to use the 12 and the 5 as our x terms. So minus 12x, and then plus 5x, and then minus 15. And this is what we're going to try and break into groups now. And you can see, I know we can use what they call the squiggly line method, which is put it in here, and you can see you're separating it into two parts. Or you can think of it basically as just taking it and making it into two parts. You're going to make this one piece, and you're going to make this another piece. So if we do that, we're going to end up with our first piece over here being 4x squared minus 12x. And our second piece is going to be positive 5x minus 15. And from this, what we're going to do now is we're going to actually do our factoring. So you could see the 4x squared and the negative 12x in this part, we can factor out a 4x. So we're going to do that and put that in front. And then what would be left is going to be x minus 3. In the second part, you could see, hopefully you could see in this piece here, we're going to be able to factor out a 5. So we're factoring out a positive 5, and we're left with x minus 3. Now, at this point, you're going to look at it, you're going to see that you have an x minus 3 in both sets of parentheses, right? Here and here. So that means you're doing this right. That tells you that's going to be one of your factors. So we're going to write that factor. Our factor is going to be x minus 3. And then your other factor is going to be whatever's left that's not the x minus 3 in parentheses. So you want to think of it sort of like you're going to be erasing that piece. So we're going to be saying, like, if this isn't here, okay, and if this is in here, what do we have? And from that, you should see what you're going to have is you're going to have this 4x and this positive 5, which tells you that your other factor is going to be 4x plus 5. And here we have this factored as pretty much as far as we can go. So hopefully that clears up a little bit about the AC method. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, what happens if when I listed my factors, I listed these two factors in the wrong order? Well, what would happen then? Well, let's take a look and see. What I did is I just rewrote this in a different order. The positive 5x and the negative 12x are now in a different place. Doesn't mean that you can't do the problem, and you're going to do the problem just as easily as you did it the other way. So now when we talk about our groupings, we're going to have this piece, and we're going to have this piece. So you could see again, if you just put your little squiggly line in there, it breaks it into two parts, the same as it did before. So our first part, when we look at the 4x squared and the 5x, you should see that the only thing you could factor out is an x. So we're going to do that. So this is going to become an x times 4x plus 5. And for the second part, hopefully you could see what you could factor out of there is a negative 3. And you'll be left with 4x plus 5. So now when we write our factors, again, you can see our factor that we already have, 4x plus 5, is here. And again, not that you have to do it this way. You don't have to kind of scribble this out. But if this is in here, you could see we're left with x minus 3 as our other factor. Hopefully you can see that you have the x here and you have the minus 3. So that's going to be your x minus 3. So that's what happens if you put these terms in a different order. It still works. It's just that you're going to have the factors in a different order, which again is multiplication. And multiplication, you remember, is commutative, so it really doesn't matter. Okay, here's another example. Hopefully you could see that there's a GCF. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take that GCF out and we're going to factor out a negative 2. So if we take a negative 2 out, that will leave us with 2k squared minus k minus 15. So now from this, we're going to be factoring, but again, the only thing we're going to be worried about is we're going to be worried about what's happening inside the parentheses. That negative 2 is just going to kind of come along for the ride. So our AC method means we would multiply, in this case, our 2 here times our negative 15. And 2 times negative 15 is going to equal negative 30. So we need two numbers that multiply to make negative 30, but they have to add to make negative 1. Again, they have to add to make negative 1 because this is a negative 1 here. So let's see what those numbers are going to be. Again, after you go through, if you need to make a table, that's fine. But we should be able to tell that those two numbers are going to be a negative 6 and a 5. So if we factor this, our negative 2 stays there. And then inside here, what we're going to have is we're going to have 2k, and then, 2k squared, minus 6k, plus 5k, and then we have to have minus 15. So when we factor this now, we're going to have, again, negative 2 outside. And then we're going to put our 2k squared with our negative 6k. And we're going to put our 5k with our negative 15. Which gives us a negative 2. And then inside our parentheses, we're going to pull out a 2k, which leaves us with a k minus 3. And over here, we're going to pull out a 5, which leaves us with a k minus 3. So when we look at this, we could see, hopefully you could see what your factors are going to be. This k minus 3 is going to be your one factor, right? So we know we're going to have that. And the other factor that we're going to have, again, hopefully you can see it already, is going to be this 2k and this plus 5. So that's going to be 2k plus 5. And don't forget the negative 2 that's in front. And that would be your final answer.